All right, well, let's feel free to continue adding stuff to the chat, but let's get started with Julie. So Julie, let me turn it over to you and have you tell us all about sustainable energy utility. Thank you for being here.
Sure, thank you for having me. So I was invited to come talk about Ann Arbor. Hi, Nan. Nan is my neighbor. Nan lives right down the street. So she used to be neighbors with Larry Junk, who wasn't anyway. It's all very small town. Okay, so thank you for inviting me. I was invited to come talk about the sustainable energy utility that the city, that our office is proposing. I'm a senior energy analyst at the Office of Sustainability and Innovation for the city of Ann Arbor. So before I launch, so I can figure out how much people know already, how many people have heard of A20? Okay, most people, but not all people. Okay, so for those who don't know, A20 is Ann Arbor's plan to get to a just transition to carbon neutrality by 2030. In 2019, end of 2019, the City Council declared a climate emergency and tasked the Office of Sustainability and Innovations to come up with a plan to get to carbon neutrality by 2030. We had 5 months to do it. So that was a fun 5 months of whirlwind of activity and engaging the public and technical advisors. And that's what we did. We drafted a plan. The plan was unanimously adopted in the spring of 2020. And so now we are in implementation phase. So as part, the A20 plan has 7 overarching strategies and 44 very specific actions to get us there. So it's very specific. And there's flexibility built in because, as we know, the landscape changes, the legislative potentials we're able to do change, technology changes. So strategy 1 of the plan is to power our grid with 100% renewable energy. And getting that done is complicated. For those of you who don't know, we have a franchise with DTE that is in perpetuity. It's a forever franchise. That's a really smart thing for a legislator to do in 1904 or whenever this Foot Act legislation was passed, which basically said anyone with a franchise for electricity had that, it was permanent. So that's what we're stuck with. So we can't go to market and, negotiate our franchise. What the Constitution does give us the ability to do, however, is because we are a municipality, we can offer our own utility. And there's 2 ways to do that when you already have a franchise. One is called a taking. And a taking would be like basically what people think about when they think about municipalizing a utility. So we have the constitutional right to take DTE's infrastructure and pay for it. So what that would look like would be we own what exists right now. There is some background noise. I wonder if people could mute who are not muted a little bit. I think, yeah, thanks everyone. So what that would look like is basically there have been, no one's municipalized their utility in Michigan in a very, very long time, like 100 years or something like that, because it's not easy to do. Boulder just tried and failed. Some places have tried and succeeded in other states. But basically you're in court usually for quite a long time, trying to battle out how much you would have to pay for the infrastructure and the monopoly privilege and all of those things. And then at the end of that period of time, and however much money that ended up being, what we would have if we fully municipalized in Ann Arbor is we would have what we currently have, which is the poles and wires, the infrastructure that is here, and it would not be decarbonized. We would have to then start decarbonizing it, modernizing it, undergrounding wires, doing whatever we have to do. We would most surely miss our 2030 goal. So there are benefits to municipalization. We know that municipal utilities do better than investor-owned utilities. That is not a question. They're cheaper, they're more resilient, they're more responsive to the community and, and we'd be able to sort of decide in what direction we wanted to take things like clean energy. But there are downsides. We'd own DTE's arguably very aging and difficult infrastructure, and now we'd have to do something about it, which is terrifying to me. And the length of time and money that it would cost. So then what? So our current investor-owned utility, DTE, their grid mix is a mess. As many of us know, they're still heavily reliant on coal. They're building new gas plants. Their plans to get to renewables are way slower than the science really needs them to be. So Ann Arbor has conceived of something called a sustainable energy utility. So the Constitution also gives us as a municipality the right to create a parallel or competing utility with our investor-owned utility. Historically, this is a kind of a stupid idea. Historically, when you think about putting up new poles and wires right next to poles and wires that already exist and then competing for customers, not an efficient way to deliver electricity to people. However, in the past 5-7 years, the advances in distributed generation, so solar, batteries, smart meters, load management, all of the technology that's necessary allows us to conceive of a different type of utility that does not focus on distribution from faraway power plants with substations and big distribution lines and transmission lines, but instead on local generation. It's focused on generation more than it's focused on big distribution. So here we can envision an SEU, which is a municipal utility, helping put solar all over everything. So SEU owned solar all over our footprint in Ann Arbor. So individual homes that wanted to sign up for it, they would be getting solar on their homes without paying for it, the upfront cost. So let's say Lila has a home, and let's say she owns her home and she wants to put solar on it, and she doesn't, instead she has two choices. One is purchase the solar and then you get the sort of full financial benefit of getting solar. The other would be SEU on solar. The SEU would own the solar. Lila would get 2 bills every month, one from DTE for much less because she's using less of their energy, and one from the SEU for the energy that the solar on her roof is producing. And the idea would be, as we distribute solar all over our footprint, not just residential homes, businesses, carports, now we can do multifamily housing, now we can deal with the rental issue and the split incentive between landlords and tenants, which is such a massive, difficult thing. We don't have to abide by DTE's restrictions on solar anymore. Right now, they limit the amount of solar you can put on your home, and we would have no limits. We would want more. More is better. And as we start getting density, this is the most fun part. As we start getting density in certain neighborhoods, streets, even a few houses together, then the SEU can start creating microgrids with houses, so that if Lila has a big sunny roof and Sarah lives next door and has big, beautiful oak trees, we can maximize solar on Lila's roof and microgrid it over to Sarah's, have a shared battery storage. We can have big battery closets, maybe, in cul-de-sacs and on corners, so that we can start microgridding our city. So the idea there is that the microgrids and all SEU owned infrastructure is under the meter. DTE doesn't like this, as you might imagine, but DTE, according to our energy lawyers who say no to everything, they say yes to this, because they say that DTE can't say no, because DTE can say no to an interconnection with your solar if it's too big, for example, but we're not going to use the grid in our SEU. The grid will provide backup power to the folks who are enrolled in the SEU. They can't say no. They can't say, no, Ken, I won't give you energy, because they are an exclusive, they're the franchise, they have to. So we'll be able to interconnect in one direction. So the energy won't flow back to the grid. It will only flow within the microgrid or to the battery and back to the home. So the other things that we can do with an SEU besides distributed generation all over the place and storage, which is absolutely necessary to make this work. Because if we're not backflowing into the grid, we must have batteries all over the place too. And that is, we can eventually, this is really exciting to me, we could do district geothermal. So geothermal loops right now are doable for people who own property. They're expensive and disruptive and difficult. But when you're a utility, the city owns the right of ways. And so we could do district geothermal with the SEU and hook people up to a loop that is shared. That is a huge thing. We can do downtown districts, commercial districts, residential districts. We can do on-bill financing, which is also a really big deal. On-bill financing means, let's say David wants to do $10,000 worth of weatherization to his home, insulation, air sealing, updating things to reduce his energy usage, but that's a big chunk of change. Through the SEU, we could get that done, and he could get that done, but we could help him finance it over, say, 25 years. So it's really spread out over time. And then that stays with the meter, stays with the house. So when David goes to sell his house, the next person that comes in benefits from all of the improvements and continues to pay that off over the 25-year life of the on-bill financing. We can also do on-bill financing for electrification. So right now we're all burning fossil fuels in our houses and our apartments. We have gas furnaces, gas stoves, gas water heaters, gas dryers. This is a Midwestern problem. It's not a universal problem in the South. They tend to heat and all these things with electricity. Easier to clean up the electrical grid than every single individual building. So there again, the cost, there's a premium to switching over to things like heat pumps. It costs more. And there again, with on-bill financing, until the market starts shifting and these things become much more affordable, we can help facilitate that transition with on-bill financing as well. So that's the general gist of it. The other nice thing about it is it really aligns with the adopted energy principles that City Council adopted, which have everything to do with equity. And if we're an SEU, we can start with and center some of our frontline neighborhoods. We're already working with the neighborhood in Bryant. If anyone's familiar with that area, we've been working with them for about 8 months or so. Our goal is to make Bryant neighborhood the first fully decarbonized existing neighborhood than I think anywhere. It's one thing to build a new net zero neighborhood. It's another to take a bunch of houses built in 1970 and create a net zero decarbonized neighborhood, but that's what we're working on. So we've been in there working with the Community Action Network. They have a community center there. This neighborhood is one of the higher BIPOC. It's like 50% BIPOC, I think, and one of the lowest socioeconomic neighborhoods that we have in our city. So instead of starting with, say, Burns Park and Ann Arbor Hills at doing all of our fancy things, we're trying to reverse that and start centering where people are really energy burdened, where resilience is a huge issue, and where people have not been centered in some of the innovation that's happening. So we're in there right now working on energy audits. We've got grant funding to do energy audits of the whole neighborhood. We've got a solar assessment of the whole neighborhood, so we know what it will take. And we're working on grants as well to sort of start the work with the neighbors. We're also working on workforce development in there, teaching folks how to do the energy audits that are being done there, and helping align people with some of the trades if they're interested in this kind of work and so forth. So that would be where we would start, most likely with the intense neighborhood, but we would also just start in general all over the place with trying to get solar everywhere. I could go on for like a whole hour. That's why I didn't bring slides, because I knew I would go for an hour if I had slides. So
Hey,
I'm going to stop because I'm sure there are questions.
yeah, thank you. Thank you so much, Julie. We do have a few minutes for questions. Can I just start by saying, you know, what's it going to take, or when will this actually start in Ann Arbor?
Yeah, that's a great question. So most recently, the city council instructed that they're supportive. The Energy Commission is excited about it. City Council appears excited about it. So what we're currently going on is our last directive from council, which was to do three things. One is develop a communications plan so that we can start gleaning community interest. This is complicated. It just took me 15 minutes to tell you what this was. Yeah, this is hard. This is a complicated issue. So we're trying to work with some of our communications people on how do you tell people about this and how much interest would there be, because that helps us understand the rates of what we would charge. The more people that would be interested, the lower the cost of the energy, at least to begin with. So we're working on that right now. And that'll be launched within the next month, I think. We're looking to people like you and all of the partners or collaborators with A20 to help us be ambassadors, to be able to broadcast the messages that we are sort of struggling in creating. We're also looking for some partners to help us craft the message or to test some of our messages on. Like, does this make sense? If you know nothing about energy, does this make sense? If you're deeply involved, does this make sense? Is this motivating? So that's step one. Next thing, we're also working on all three of these things. One is we're issuing RFPs to do a microgrid technical study. So microgrid, Bryant neighborhood, and I think Viridian are our two test places, so that we can see exactly what's technically required and financially. And then the third, I forget the third. Oh, a governance structure. So we're working on these things. Then we'll come back to the city council in a few months, I imagine. And then we'll see what they say. And the nice thing about it is we don't need any kind of legislation. We can do this with ordinance. It would only require a vote of the people if we are looking for certain kinds of funding, like bonds.
Mhm. Okay, excellent. Another question that Larry and Chris asked is, can this be expanded into neighboring areas?
Yeah, that is a great question. Short answer, no. Long answer, more complicated. So the Constitution gives the municipality a right to provide energy to its own residents, but the Constitution does not allow that municipality to expand beyond its own borders. So directly, no. Indirectly, if we're laying the path for this, we are laying a path for everyone to follow that should be much easier. There may be areas where consolidation is possible, like billing, for example, technical analysis, for example, things like that, that we could get away with some collaboration, but we can't directly provide. One of the things that in our energy principles that we look at is we want speed and we want replicability, and we want things to be local as we make choices. This is much more replicable than, say, full municipalization. Even if Ann Arbor was to go that route, which we still may, there still may be appetite for that, and that maybe end up what happening. It's hard to see, say, IPSI following in our footsteps. So basically everyone else would be stuck with DTE without a path. Whereas the SEU, we think, could lay a path.
Is a township included as another municipality?
Now you're getting into legal questions that I don't feel qualified to answer. If a township is a municipality or not, it's a good question for an energy attorney.
Okay. Another question is, would, how would you run lines to connect people on a microgrid? Because, we wouldn't be able to use DTE.
Yep. So it depends on the microgrid. If it's a tiny thing and it's one neighbor with another neighbor, I can only imagine we'd bury it. If it's a school microgridding, or that's more like community solar. If we have a very hyper local community solar array gridding to, then there'd be some above ground as well, but it would be very small scale. So it's absolutely sort of organic and dependent on the immediate situation.
Okay, we'll do one last question from Barbara in the chat. And she says, can an existing geothermal field under a home be tapped and turned into a mini microgrid for homes?
Oh, I don't know, but that's really an exciting idea. I'm not sure. That is a great technical question for whoever starts doing the technical part of the microgrids, which I am not a technical microgridding expert, but I love that idea. And that's the kind of thing we're looking for.
Cool. All right, well, okay, Ken, we'll do one more and then we need to, get on.
Sorry,
with
I talked too much.
No, you didn't at
so
all.
hard to make it short.
Really awesome, Julie. And I know there's appetite to learn more, but we'll have to find another venue after Ken. You go ahead.
Okay.
Yeah, this is about a slightly different topic, but it's one that I've been meaning to write to this group about and also to Julie, which is this latest anti-solar move from DTE that would essentially impose a tax on people with solar panels and greatly cut the amount of what do you call it, money you get from sending electricity back into the grid.
Yep.
And I'm just wondering if the 820 folks are or know of anything that's going on to oppose this.
Absolutely.
I'll put some links in the chat about this before I know about it.
Ken, I'm glad you brought it up. Yes, the city is formally intervening. This is a DTE rate case, and they are proposing once again to raise rates something like 9% across the board, which is like really, really starting to hurt people who are energy burdened. And it's 1,000 pages, this rate case. So our lawyers, oh my God, I could never be a lawyer, are tearing through it. And Ken's right, it would put sort of all these fees on solar and create just a real financial disincentive. I can't imagine MPSC, this has to get approved by the Michigan Public Service Commission. Ann Arbor as a city is intervening in the rate case. I know the Great Lakes Renewable Energy Association and many environmental groups are intervening as formal interveners. And you can do that as a group. The CCL could do that. And as individuals, there are public comments and opportunities to speak to the commission when this goes up. So you could do both. Strongly encourage people to do that. And I can, while you guys are meeting, I'll go look for some links to put in the chat for you.
Okay, and I will send out the links to this group and to Julie by email, although I'm sure, Julie, you've got all these, but.
All right.
Okay.
Well, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ken. And thank you so much, Julie, for taking the time. You're welcome to stick around for the rest of our meeting if you want, but I know you're busy and you're welcome to leave if you need to.